Hey everyone, thanks for coming to our YouTube channel and checking out Reunion. Reunion's mission is helping people find their way back to God. And we're all trying to find meaning, purpose, and significance. And at Reunion, we believe that we can find answers to all of our deepest longings in God. And today we're starting a new series called Advent, There is a Light. And for us, Advent begins in darkness. Not a complete and utter darkness, but a palpable one. During Advent, the themes of light and darkness are front and center. We're in a struggle in this life, a struggle to live in the light and allow the light to fill the deepest parts of our hearts and minds. However, darkness has a way of helping us focus on that glimmer of light. And Advent is about returning our gaze to light that has come into the world. It's about allowing that light to fill us and change us. Before we get to Nathan, let me share about how you can get connected with Reunion. If you are in the Boston area and you're looking for a community to wrestle with some of the hardest questions in life, we invite you to participate with us in Somerville and Davis Square. We'd love to meet you and join our community as we do this life thing together. You can find all the details on our website, reunionboston.com. If you have your phone handy, also feel free to scan the QR code using your camera and it will take you directly to our connection card. Fill out the card and we'll reach out to answer any questions you might have about faith or how you can be a part of our community. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram. Here's Nathan as he shares with us.
Hey everyone, my name is Nathan and I am excited and I'm grateful to be hanging out with all of you today. As many of you probably know, if you've watched any of our videos before, my family moved to Boston from Seattle. And this past week, I was just kind of thinking back on some of these really crazy few days that we had pretty early on into our time living there. You might not know this because I didn't, but Seattle has some really crazy weather on occasions. When most people think of Seattle, my guess is they think of this idea that it just rains all the time. And that is mostly true. But Seattle is also known to get some really intense and crazy windstorms. And there was this one particular evening when we were living there that we caught wind, pun intended, of this windstorm that was about to happen. I really didn't think anything of it, but the people I worked with, they all told me like, no, these are really big storms. Storms are a big deal. And that we needed to do things like get food and be prepared to go the next few days without power. And I guess that was a pretty common occurrence there. Now, I was really appreciative of them telling me that because we were completely unprepared. We needed to go grocery shopping already. We really didn't have any food in our house. We hadn't been charging any of our devices. We didn't plan for any of this. We didn't have flashlights or anything like that. So this was all completely new to us. We'd lost power before, obviously, but it wasn't really anything like this that had happened to us before. We never really lost power for days. So I left work a little bit early. I go to pick up Emily and we head for Costco, hoping to get everything that we're going to need to just kind of bunker down in our house for the next few days. Of course, everyone else has the same idea as us. And by the time we get there, the shelves are very bare, almost completely empty. We got some food and some snacks and just enough like food and water to last us for a while, but no flashlights or anything like that. When we get home and then it happens. We start to charge everything, but right as we do, we start to hear the wind pick up. And we're living on the 4th floor of an apartment building, and we could like literally hear the wind get stronger and stronger with each passing hour that evening. So by like 8 or 9 o'clock, I thought our building was going to fall over. And I mean this like, I'm from Kansas. I'm from a state that is known for being windy. And this is the craziest windstorm I have ever heard. Finally, about 9:30 or 10 o'clock that night, it happened. We lost power. And hoping that they would be able to fix things pretty quickly, we just decided, hey, let's go to bed. And we're going to have this expectation that maybe we'll wake up the next morning and we'll have our power restored. Well, that did not happen. And as the day went on, we kept hearing reports of pretty severe power outages and that most people likely weren't going to get power back for at least another day or two. So the storm had died down and we decided we were going to leave our apartment, go for a walk, just try to find things to do while we waited for power to be restored. And as evening came and grew closer, we knew we were not going to be one of those people that got their power back. So we made our way back to our apartment, ready to again bunker down for the night in the darkness. And there was this weird, kind of eerie experience as we watched the sun set behind our building and light started to fade out of our apartment as night truly set in. Like I said, we didn't have any flashlights. We did have one thing to light up our place. A few months before all this happened, Emily was given this thing called a glassy baby. Glassy babies are literally just fancy candle holders. And you just like take a tea light and you put it in the middle and it kind of lights up in the whatever color the glassy baby is. So we get this tea light, we put it inside a glassy baby and we lit it, hoping that it would just give us a little bit of light to navigate our apartment by. But we found out it did so much more. Like it lit up our entire apartment. We lived in this kind of one-bedroom apartment that had a pretty wide open space, and this tiny light somehow filled the entire room with light. I mean, it was incredible. So that night by candlelight, we did the most romantic thing we could think of. We watched Monsters, Inc. I know. Romance. In truth, like now we kind of look back on it and it was a pretty fun experience. And we look back on that experience kind of with rose-colored glasses. But in truth, all we wanted that night so badly was for our power to come back on. I mean, having a candle, it was great. But it also wasn't enough. It worked for a little while, sure, but all we did was we sat in hope that we would have our power again soon, that we would have light again soon, that we wouldn't have some light in our dark apartment, but that our apartment wouldn't be dark any longer. See, this morning we're kicking off the Advent season with this new series, There Is a Light. And I know that most of us, we think of Advent simply as just this time leading up to Christmas, maybe a church word for the Christmas season, but Advent is very intentional language that the church has used for generations. The word Advent comes from the Latin word adventus, which is usually translated as coming. See, in the Christian calendar, Advent is the period of preparation for the celebration of the birth of Jesus at Christmas, but it's more than that. It's a period of waiting, a period of anticipation, a period where we look forward to the arrival and the birth of Jesus and the time that we celebrate that on Christmas. But it's also a moment where we remember that Christmas is a foreshadowing for something greater, that Christ is going to come again. And we wait in anticipation for Christ's return as we take time to celebrate his birth all those years ago. It's a time where we remember that light is coming, which we desperately need to be reminded of right now. I mean, throughout this series, we're going to really look at these themes of light and darkness that we see in our script, in our Bibles, and in our worlds. And I think that'll be really helpful for some of us right now because we're living in a season of darkness. And I mean that in many ways. I mean, it literally is a season of physical darkness right now. The sun goes down at like noon each day. It's getting darker and darker earlier. We're serving lunch and there's no sun outside, it feels like. And that has a real effect on us. As much as we joke about it, it really affects our bodies and our personalities. Seasonal depression is going to begin to rise. Our bodies will likely become more tired more quickly because of the lack of sunlight. A lack of sunlight can have a drastic effect on our health. You know, we will feel this darkness. And for some of us, emotionally, there's darkness. You know, we look around at our world and we feel darkness during the Christmas season. We always hear that Christmas is like the most wonderful time of the year, and it's a time that is intended for celebration, but that isn't the case for all of us. You know, loneliness, time away from family, trying to meet deadlines at work before the end of the season. You know, we carry the weight of financial burdens with us, the pain of war that we see all around us and conflict that we experience, empty seats at our dinner tables that were filled a year ago, this constant news stream that is rarely filled with anything joyous or exciting. We we feel this darkness. Spiritually, for some of us, there's darkness as well. We feel a brokenness around us and within us. We feel this darkness, and darkness can easily become the only thing that we feel, and it can become exhausting. It can make us feel hopeless. What do we do when we look around and all that it seems that we are able to see is darkness? What if this Advent season wanted to offer us something different? What if in this time of Advent we got a small glimpse of light in the darkness? What if a baby's birth all those years ago could actually change everything? See, when he wrote his gospel, John wrote a letter to a group of people who were experiencing a season and feeling of hopelessness as well. And what John writes to them might be extremely pertinent and helpful for the time that many of us find ourselves in today. Now, before we jump in, we should note John's gospel is not like the other gospels that we read in scriptures. Matthew, Mark, and Luke gives this basic, kind of synopsis of Jesus's life and death and resurrection. But the Gospel of John is different. Instead, John has this intention to write and tell us who Jesus was from the very beginning. That's why John begins his gospel with these words found in John 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. With him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. See, John's birth narrative, it isn't like any of the other ones that we find in the Gospels. He doesn't begin with a lineage or with Mary and Joseph. He doesn't talk about a baby being born in Nazareth. John starts long before that, a lot longer before that, in fact. John starts his story at the very beginning, before creation was even underway, when it was only God and nothing else. And John notes at this time, there was this word. Now, the Greek word that John uses here is the word logos. And this was very intentional by John. Greek philosophers saw balance and they saw harmony and order in nature and believed that there was a spiritual harmony behind this order, and that was the logos. The Greeks said that the universe has a logos and that our lives must be in alignment with that logos if we want to live our lives to go well. The issue that most people argued was what this logos actually was. So John claims here from the very first sentence of his gospel that Jesus was the logos. Jesus was the word. Jesus was from the very beginning. For John, logos existed with God, but also the logos was God. This word was going to bring life, and everything that truly was life was going to come through this word. But John also notes that at some point, darkness was going to come. See, in order for light to shine into the darkness, like John claims is going to happen, that means that darkness would have to be the normal. And to many of the readers in this original text, darkness would have felt like the normal. See, John most likely wrote his letter sometime around 80 AD. And he most likely wrote it to a church that was meeting in Ephesus. Ephesus was a pretty diverse church filled with Jewish converts to Christianity, as well as many kind of Greco-Roman Christians who would have begun following Jesus. Each one of these groups of people would have felt a very kind of specific darkness around them. See, for Jewish Christians, this would have been roughly 10 years after the destruction of the temple. And the temple was this representation of the place where God was dwelling among his people. It was this tangible reminder that God was with them. They were likely, because of this destruction, scattered among the Greco-Roman world. So it would have been for many of them like this constant reminder of the time that their ancestors were living in exile, this extremely dark time in Jewish history. And for Gentile Christians living in Ephesus, following the way of Jesus would have gone against many of the customs and cultural expectations of the city. So Ephesus was the center for worship of the Greek goddess Artemis. And in the middle of the city, there was this massive temple to Artemis. And it was believed that this temple was probably kind of like not just a place for worship, but a central hub for a lot of community life that took place in the city. So to refuse to worship there would have led to exclusion from a lot of just kind of the regular daily life in the city of Ephesus. I mean, does all this kind of sound familiar to you? Lonely, isolated, discouraged, fearful, uncertain, darkness. But John's first words here are a reminder that from the beginning, God had a plan in place to bring light into the darkness. Light was always going to be the plan. The light was always going to overcome the darkness. And even as John's readers, much like us, looked around them and they only saw darkness, John's words here stand as a stark reminder that darkness will soon be overcome. And a season that probably felt hopeless for many of the early recipients of this letter, John wants to remind them that they can cling to hope, to true hope. And I'd guess for many of us, we need this reminder today as well. See, people often tend to think that the opposite of hope is despair. But for most people, the struggle is not with this kind of full-on despair, but almost a notch down with disappointment. We have so many things that we have put our hope in, and they have let us down. We are waiting, for hope, a true hope, a real hope that will deliver our deepest longings. And the question is not, do we hope, but what do we put our hope in? And John's call for his readers is to cling to the hope of a baby that was born. God breaking through into humanity. That is the hope that can stand against our disappointments. And John continues his letter. He says this, "There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light." Now, John kind of like interestingly here transitions the story, not into the birth of Jesus, but to the one who is going to prepare the way and point towards the coming of Jesus. This guy named John the Baptist. And John is a fascinating character in the birth narrative. And we see him in some of the other gospels when they tell this story. In Luke's gospel, the story of John the Baptist is a story that is surrounded by this theme of hope. See, John is born to parents that were far past childbearing years. And many assumed that they would never be able to have children. And John's parents, Elizabeth and Zachariah, had been praying for a child for so long, and it seemed like they had all but given up until one day when Zachariah, who was a priest at the time, was selected to go into the temple and burn incense as part of his responsibilities. And in the temple, Zechariah found an angel waiting for him. And that angel told him that his wife would give birth to a son, a child that was born into a situation where it seemed impossible. Hope. And John grows up and he preaches and teaches on this kind of same theme over and over again, that a Messiah was coming, that something new was breaking through, that in the midst of disappointment, John is proclaiming to others that there is a hope that is coming, hope. The whole of John's life was surrounded by hope. And the purpose of John's life was to point to a greater hope. The story of John the Baptist is such a fascinating one because by many standards, he didn't live a very successful life. He lived in the wilderness for most of his life. He baptized people, but also just told them that this is great, but a greater baptism is coming. He didn't provide people with forgiveness. He only told them that they had to repent and reminded them that forgiveness was available. He didn't do many great things. But evangelist and author Leonard Ravenhill writes this about John the Baptist. John the Baptist never performed any miracles, yet he was greater than any of the Old Testament prophets. John's entire life was about pointing people to the one who was coming. John was a candle that was placed in the darkness. His whole purpose was to remind people that daybreak was just around the corner. And it's no wonder that John, the author of the gospel, uses John the Baptist as this anchor point for his letter. But the gospel continues. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. I mean, this is a bit of kind of like a solemn turn at this point. It feels like John kind of went with the good news, bad news in these few verses. I mean, the bad news is that even though light has come into the world, there's an element of darkness that is going to reject it. There will be those who only see and experience darkness and will choose not to receive light. But the good news is something far beyond what we might even expect. The good news is not that the light has the power to make the dark a little less powerful. The good news is that this light has the power to fully transform our lives. We're really going to land on this idea a little bit next week, so I won't give away too much, but the light came into the world not just to make the world a better place, but to transform our lives, to make dead people alive. The birth of Jesus wasn't about just making the world a little bit more happier or a little bit easier for us to live in. No, it was about something so much greater than that. See, the hope of Advent is not just about what happens when all of our dreams come true. The hope of Advent is almost about when our worst nightmares come true as well. That whatever comes, whatever does not come, it's a reminder of hope that we are not alone. The light came into the world. He is Emmanuel. I mean, that is translated as God with us. That is our hope. Not that nothing bad will ever happen to us because we follow Jesus, but that no matter what happens to us, light will overcome the darkness. And this is the true light that we can put our hope in. And that light has the power to alter our lives completely, to bring light not just around us, but within us, to take us from people who were far from God to now being able to be called his children. The light isn't just hope for difficult times, it's hope for us eternal. It has the power to transform our lives right here and right now, but also for all of eternity. And that is all possible because of one moment in time. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. The Word became flesh. God among his people. All those years ago in the tiny town of Bethlehem, in that little stable, light came into the darkness. Light came into our world, and in the darkest night, light continues to shine through. 1947, J.R.R. Tolkien wrote this essay that he titled On Fairy Stories. If you aren't aware, Tolkien is the author of the greatest fictional story ever told, The Lord of the Rings. Sorry, Harry Potter nerds. It's Tolkien. And after he released his masterpiece series of books, he sat down to write this essay. And in it, he essentially invented this new word that would be used a few different moments in literary history. Tolkien, in his essay, coined the term eucatastrophe. A eucatastrophe is a sudden turn of events in a story which ensures that the protagonist does not meet some terrible, impending, and very plausible and probable doom. Now, he coined this word by fixing the Greek prefix eu, meaning good, to catastrophe, the word traditionally used in kind of a classically inspired literary criticism to refer to an unraveling or a conclusion of a drama's plot. So essentially, a eucatastrophe is a massive turn in fortune when all hope seems lost. Think Gandalf showing up with an army during the Battle of Helm's Deep, or Han Solo showing up with the rebels to destroy the Death Star, or the kiss that saves Snow White. I mean, these are all kind of literary or, artistic examples of eucatastrophes. But interestingly enough, none of these are what Tolkien had in mind when he first coined the term. In fact, Tolkien had something much different in mind. He actually coined the phrase around the birth of Jesus. See, he calls the incarnation of Christ as the eucatastrophe of human history, and the resurrection, the eucatastrophe of the incarnation. Look, I know that right now, many of us only see darkness. Again, we are constantly told that Christmas is the most wonderful time of the year, but that just isn't the case for everyone. And even if we love Christmas, it can still come with its fair share of darkness. And right now, it might not feel like there's a lot of light. It might feel like we're huddled around a candle, trying to keep some light or trying to keep some of the darkness at bay. The beauty of the Advent season is that it promises us hope. Hope that light is here, but also that more light is coming. It allows us, just like Emily and I did that night in Seattle, to sit by the candle and have more light than we imagined, but also wait in anticipation because we know that power is going to be restored. Hope allows us to enter into the darkness again and face it because we know that one day light is going to overcome it. Maybe some of the darkness that we feel right now is just a lack of hope in general. Maybe we're so focused on the darkness that it's all that we see and we do not think that it can get better. I get it. It's hard to wait in darkness. But the birth of Jesus was a eucatastrophe that gives hope. The incarnation showed us that God was willing to give up everything for us, to come as a baby for the sake of humanity. And if he was faithful to us when it cost him his life, we can trust that he will continue to be faithful to us in our dark moments today. Pastor and author Rich Villodas sums this idea up really well when he wrote this. The good news of Advent is not that we are faithful in our waiting. We often aren't. But God is faithful in his coming. Maybe some of us, we don't really feel this. We don't feel an overwhelming sense of darkness right now. And if that's you, that's awesome. I'm really happy for you. I hope that this Advent season is everything that you are hoping and longing for it to be. But I also want to ask you to remember those who see darkness and only see darkness right now. And I want to ask you, much like John the Baptist, to be a voice that points to hope. Yeah, I feel like I've said this so much, but I say it because I really fully believe it. This is why community is so essential. This is why the church is called to be a community of believers walking through life together, and not just some people that we come and sit with once a week on a Sunday morning. People find hope so often by having people around them point them towards it. People find hope by having friends give glimpses of lights that point towards the light of Jesus while they walk through the darkness. And maybe you can be that person today. Maybe you can be a candle that reminds people that daybreak is coming. And in fact, because of the manger and because of the cross, it's actually already begun. No matter how dark life feels right now, Christmas is this tangible reminder that light is here. And light, even a tiny bit of light, has such a power over darkness. A tiny bit of light can remove darkness from a whole room. Today, let's cling to the hope that we have because of the light that came into the world. I thank you guys so much for watching. Let me hand things back over to Matt.
Let's close with our benediction. Be people who know hope, that is not just for someday, but for this day, here, now, in this moment that opens to us. Hope not made of wishes, but of substance. Hope that has breath and a beating heart. Hope that will not keep quiet and be polite. Hope that knows how to holler when it's called for. Hope that knows how to sing when there seems little cause. Hope that raises us from the dead. Not someday, but this day. Every day, again and again and again. We pray in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Go in peace and live the church.